All right. Good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining in. Happy snowy day. I'm Jeremy Solon. I'm the Wisconsin Extension Maple Syrup Project Coordinator. And I'm joined by Allissa Stutte, who is the farm manager at Mino Bimaadiziiwin Bimaadiziiwin. There we go. I knew I'd get it. But, so before we jump in, just a couple of logistics. You all see a poll, hopefully kind of as you join in here. If you'd complete that, we'd appreciate that. Just a little bit of background on you all. And basically the format of this evening, I have a few questions for Allissa that we'll go through, and then we'll have some time for you all to ask questions as well. So expect we'll kind of Allissa and my conversation will be 20 minutes or so, somewhere in there, and then opportunity to ask more questions. So that's the plan for the evening. And so appreciate you all joining in and your interest in this topic. I'm excited to learn more about Allissa and the Red Cliff Farm. I'll just call it that for right now. Then I won't mess it up once again. But yeah, we'll jump in, I guess. So I'm gonna again, if you get a chance to complete that poll, I'll leave that up for just another minute here as we get started. But Allissa, maybe kick us off to start with of how did you come to be where you are, in a sense? How did you get interested in food work generally, and specifically in tribal food sovereignty work?
Sure. Yeah, so like Jeremy said, my name is Allissa Stutte, and I am currently the farm manager / food systems coordinator at Mino Bimaadiziiwin Tribal Farm, which is the tribal farm for the Red Cliff Band of Lake Superior, Chippewa. And let's see, how did I get into food work? I've, for a really long time been pretty passionate about local agriculture and supporting local food systems in any way that I could. And as an undergraduate, I studied biology and also social justice. And then as a graduate student, I focused my studies on environmental justice and food justice work. I have worked on a variety of vegetable operations, mostly in northern Wisconsin. I farmed a little bit in the Southwest as well. And I actually started working for the tribe in a different position. I was the environmental justice specialist for about a year. And after I'd been in that position for about a year, the former farm manager left that role. And so I was able to transition into the role that I have now, which has been just really amazing because it's been a really good fit of both my background and my experiences and also where my passions lie. Yeah, and so that's kind of how I ended up where I am right now.
Yeah, nice. That's awesome. And kind of cool to be able to connect that justice work and the food systems work and tie all those things together. So yeah, awesome. So tell us what all takes place at Mino
Bimaadiziiwin.
Yep.
Yeah. So also Mino Bimaadiziiwin means the good life in Ojibwe-Moan. And what takes place at Mino Bimaadiziiwin is a lot of times the hardest question for me to answer, because we do so many different things and it's kind of hard to describe in a succinct way everything that goes on. So I'll do my best. Yeah, so we are a diversified fruit and vegetable operation, so we produce a lot of food. We produce a lot of vegetables. We have about 1 acre in intensive vegetable production. We have a few acres of apple orchards and some other fruit trees as well. And then we have a small flock of laying hens. And so a lot of the things we do here are the things that you would expect to see at a typical vegetable operation. We have CSA, a community supported agriculture program. It's not that big. There are about 30 members, and a portion of the shares are always dedicated to tribal elders. We do sales to local grocery stores. We have an on-site farm stand every Friday throughout the growing season. So we kind of grow food and distribute it in that way. But besides just the hands-on, vegetable and fruit production, we are also really focused on supporting the food sovereignty efforts of Red Cliff, and we do that in a variety of different ways as well. For example, food accessibility is a really big priority for us, and so last year we piloted a sliding scale payment contribution system, or like a pay what you can system, which means that all of the produce coming from the farm is available to community members at whatever costs they are able to or want to contribute. We get a lot of our food directly to the Bayfield School cafeteria, because about 70 to 80% of the students in the cafeteria are Red Cliff tribal members. So we see that as a really great way to be getting the produce we grow directly to Red Cliff tribal members, specifically like the youth. Yeah, we are part of a pilot program through USDA. The food distribution program on Indian reservations is a program that most reservations have, and you could submit an application through the USDA last year, kind of asserting that, like, as a food distribution program within a tribe, you had the ability to source food yourselves, whether that was food from local producers or food from tribal producers, or food that just happened to be a little more like culturally appropriate or relevant for the community that you're working with. And so we were awarded that, and that means that we've been able to get almost a dozen different varieties of fruits and vegetables, like, directly to the food distribution program, which has been like really an amazing place to direct the veggies that come from the farm. Yeah, we work with the Red Cliff Fish Company, and we compost 100% of the fish waste that comes from them. So we have a pretty good size fish composting operation. Yeah, and then we also try to work really closely with the school district in other ways by hosting field trips and educational events. And then on top of all of those components that are more directed to food production and distribution, we also have a lot of focus on education and outreach. Just last year, we were able to hire a full-time food sovereignty coordinator, which has been an amazing way for us to build our capacity and meet some of those other needs of the community, and increase the number of workshops that we're doing, and other food sovereignty initiatives, such as equipment lending programs, so folks can borrow equipment for maple sugaring or wild ricing or walleye spearing. Yeah, so we have a lot of things going on, and we're really grateful to be working on all of them.
Yeah, that's awesome. This is maybe a little bit of a tangent, but just because you mentioned it with the work with the school district, are you also working with them on the food preparation side, or is it just kind of distribution? Not just, that's a huge thing to get food into the school district, but is there a kind of food preparation aspect to that, or are they pretty good about kind of handling that on their own?
Yeah, they're pretty good about handling that on their own. It's really amazing how much emphasis the local school district has put on local foods, and within the past year, they've also hired a full-time agricultural educator position.
That's
so
awesome.
That's another avenue for us to work directly with the school by working with that position. And so she kind of helps with the back end of things, and we're able to focus more on the production and distribution.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, it's it'd be amazing if more school districts were doing that kind of work, and there's definitely interest there. So
yeah, and a lot of barriers too,
yeah.
I mean,
for sure. So it's great to hear about that partnership for sure. So I guess let's get into maple syrup and maple sugar a little bit. Tell us what happens there, kind of on the maple sugaring front, kind of what your setup is, and yeah, how that's run.
Yeah. So recently the tribe was able to reacquire an 80-acre parcel of land that had been privately owned for a few decades before. And the person who privately owned that parcel operated a sugar bush there. And so with the reacquisition of that parcel of land, that's the area that the farm now stewards, manages as a sugar bush. So we did about 300 taps last year. Again, it's not a huge operation. About 200 of the taps were on a tubing system, and then about 100 of them were the bucket system. Yeah, and with the acquisition of that land also came the sugar shack and the evaporator that had been used there before. We actually have another sugar shack and an evaporator on site here at the farm, because in previous years we have tapped at different locations just outside the reservation, and we would transport the sap back to the farm and we would boil it here. So last year was our first year full-time at the new location. And yeah, and it's an amazing place to host field trips, because yeah, there's just plenty of space for all of the kids to go and collect the sap and get all their energy out in the woods. Yeah, and so we do most of the boiling at that site, and we do bring the syrup back to the farm. We have a commercial kitchen here, and we finish it in the kitchen here. Yeah. And I think what we will start to do this upcoming sugar bush season is kind of split the boil, because sugar bush season so wonderfully overlaps with seed starting season, and it's a really, really busy time of year. And so if we can have someone out at that sugar bush site operating the boil there, we can also have someone else on site here keeping an eye on the boil and the sugar shack at the farm, and also working on some other, spring items. Yeah.
Nice. You mentioned some of the workshops that you've been doing. And I did notice this past year you did some sugaring workshops as well, right? So that's part of the education programs that you're doing as well.
Yeah, definitely.
And were those, so I guess two things about that. One, was that generally open to tribal members? And then what's the kind of involvement in the maple syruping operation? Is it primarily farm staff that's involved with that, aside from the education programs, or is there more kind of general tribal member involvement in the operation as well?
Yeah, great question. The sugar bush and the taps, like the 300 taps, that's primarily run by farm staff. But another big component of our sugar bush season is working with the community in a lot of other different aspects too. For example, the sugar bush lending program, equipment lending program. And so there are a lot of community members who want to tap maple trees, but maybe they don't have access to supplies, or maybe they don't have access to maple trees. Maybe there's just no trees growing in their backyard. And so they are able to borrow whatever equipment they might need. And 80 acres is a really big piece of land, and we're definitely not tapping on all of it. And so a lot of that land is open to other community members to tap it. And we collaborate with the Tribal Historic Preservation Office, our TIPO office, because they do a lot of sugar bush activities as well. And so we kind of work together all season long to figure out, like, what are the needs of folks that want to tap? Do they need trees to tap? Do they need equipment to tap? Or what kinds of things would be helpful to include as workshops? Last year we did a maple sugar workshop, which was led by a tribal member, and that was really amazing because I personally had never made maple sugar before. Yeah, did that answer your question?
Yeah, no, I think so. That's cool. That's, again, lots of stuff going on. multiple layers, which is awesome to see. Yeah. How did the lending program come to be, and kind of how is that structured? I mean, is it really whoever needs equipment has access to it, and then in particular about that, like how does the cooking happen? Is that then the responsibility of the individual folks who are tapping trees, or is there community kind of cooking options, I guess, boiling options as part of that?
Yeah, another great question. So the lending program kind of came to be because, you know, we were recognizing that sugar bushing is a really important cultural tradition, and there are some families in Red Cliff who have been running a sugar bush consistently for, generations. But there are also a lot of other families who maybe have become like disconnected from that tradition, and the desire was definitely there to reconnect to this important season and traditional food. And yeah, so that's kind of how the lending program started. And the first year we mostly just had buckets and lids and taps available, and any community member who wanted to borrow them could borrow them. And that was a great learning year for us, because we also realized that there were other barriers to making maple syrup. Like if you just had the bucket, maybe you didn't have the trees, or how are you going to boil a syrup, kind of like what you asked. And so that's when we began the conversation of like opening up other areas of this 80-acre parcel that folks could tap, or looking around the community at where are some other maple sugar stands that maybe just need a little more access, or improvements, or people who had tapped were definitely like coming to us and being like, how do we boil this? And so that was another learning moment for us. And so this year we put together kind of DIY backyard evaporator kits with, like stainless steel hotel pans and cinder blocks. And we put together a pretty hefty instructional booklet that was everything from how to identify a maple tree to how to finish the syrup. Yeah, so we are always, taking in feedback and learning as we go, and trying to improve these resources so that they can, best fit the needs of Red Cliff.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's great to hear. So back to the maple syrup that the farm is producing itself. What is the destination for that syrup? How does it get used?
Yeah, so we like to put it in our CSA boxes as a fun and delicious value-added product, and it's always available at the farm any time of the year. And then we always have some out at the farm stand, which we have every Friday throughout the growing season. And just like everything else that comes from the farm, the syrup is available at a sliding scale, pay what you can rate, to really just remove any accessibility barriers. We do sell some to the Red Cliff Fish Company, and they have it available in their retail section. And we get asks throughout the year for syrup donations for different events or cooking classes or giveaways, things like that. So a lot of it gets just distributed that way. Some of it always goes to the school district. Yeah, that's awesome. kind of how it gets distributed.
Yeah, that's great. So I mean, pretty much used almost entirely within the community right now.
Yeah, I think that syrup that we sell to the Red Cliff Fish Company, a lot of tourists are maybe like going home with that syrup. And I guess that's another good point to bring up, is the farm is, we are primarily 100% like grant funded. We spend a lot of time writing grants and finding funding to keep our operations going. But anytime that we can generate some revenue while still meeting the goals of the farm, that is a bonus, because we can set that aside, and that's just great for future financial stability of the farm. So maple syrup is one of those ways that we can do absolutely everything we can to make the syrup that we produce accessible, but still have some avenues to generate some revenue from it.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, and I think that, I mean, as I like think about maple syrup in a very broad way, I think about that kind of opportunity to sustain forests and get a product from it that, in a sense, every landowner could generate a little bit of revenue, which is a further incentive to protect those forests and kind of build rural economies. And so, yeah, that fits in there really well. So that's great. So I guess we've touched on these kind of pieces of food sovereignty and maple syrup. So I wonder if you could just kind of knit that together a little bit of like how maple syrup production and distribution kind of fits into the broader Red Cliff food sovereignty efforts.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, like we touched on a little bit, maple syrup is a really important traditional food, and traditional foods can serve as a really important connection to history and stories and identity. And so that's one of the reasons that it is such a focus for us, and that we are prioritizing it in the way that we do, and trying to ensure that everything we do around the sugar bush is accessible and what the community is looking for, and meeting the needs of the community in that way. Yeah, and that's another reason why we try to get as many field trips out to the sugar bush as possible, you know, to get the kids involved in this important tradition. Every year since we've been doing the sugar bush, we've been able to get a few more field trips out, and this past year we got every single elementary school class out, which was just so wonderful. And at that point in time, some of those classes had been coming out for a few years, you know, so it's almost like the kids can start to show us what to do and kind of like take the lead in what's going on out there. Yeah, and you know, it is just one piece of the picture, but it's also a really important way to connect to the seasons and to the changing of the seasons. And it's an amazing, you know, so vegetables that we grow, they're fresh and they're ready for a short amount of time, and there's lots of different ways you can preserve them, but I think maple syrup is really special because you can preserve it like all year long, and then all year long, when you're giving it away as gifts or to community members in different ways, you know, it's a reminder of the sugar bush season and how important that time of year is. Yeah,
That's great. Oh, we're getting a little dog activity in the back here, so hopefully she doesn't get any louder than that. I apologize. Yeah, so I guess kind of connecting to that, how extensive is maple syrup sugar production among Red Cliff tribal members?
it's definitely growing. There are a few families that have been operating a sugar bush like consistently year after year after year. And there are many more families who are just starting to tap back into this, no pun intended. Yeah, and that's been like really wonderful to see. And it's also really wonderful to learn from the families that have been tapping for generations on the same piece of land. Yeah, so I would say that in general, you know, like production among Red Cliff members hasn't been incredibly high, but it is growing consistently every year. And yeah, and we're just working every year to keep trying to figure out like what are the barriers to folks being able to do that. And sometimes it is as simple as like, well, you need some trees.
Right. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, so I guess final question from me, and this wasn't one I shared earlier with you. So off the cuff, what do you see as the future with your maple syrup operation?
Oh, I love that question. Yeah, I would love to see it continue to grow, and I think that the area that we want to grow in is in collaborations with different departments within the tribe. For example, the Tribal Historic Preservation Office or the Early Childhood Center, you know, we used to work with them and tap trees every year. And last year we didn't, and it would be great to reconnect with that. And there are just, you know, there are so many different aspects of sugar bushing, and not just producing maple syrup itself, but just the season. And, you know, traditionally sugar camp it wasn't just a weekend or a week, it's however long the SAP was running. And so that gives us a lot of time to really connect with a lot of different areas of food sovereignty work in Red Cliff, and to connect with a lot of different departments and build on the strengths of different departments. For example, the TIPO office has a really strong language component, and that's something that we want to continue to bring into the Sugar Bush. Yeah, and the Indigenous Arts and Science program, they do a lot of work with youth. So how can we keep working with them? How can we keep working with the Boys and Girls Club, and just continue to collaborate and build on each other's strengths? Yeah, that's where I see the future going.
Yeah, that's awesome. Good deal. Well, thank you. Yeah. So I think maybe we'll open it up to participants. So for those of you who are here, you're welcome to unmute yourself and ask a question, or if you want to drop a question in chat, that works as well. So give you a minute. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hi, Allissa.
Hi, John.
I was wondering if you'd considered going through the equip route through NRCS for some of your Sugar Bush operations. You mentioned some issues with not having access, or needing to improve some of the maple stands, or and then aside from their practices that can address those issues. And then NRCS will also help with energy efficiency of the sugar shack. So
yeah, that's something that's on the list. The parcel of land was, and this is something that I am not an expert on, but it was under some type of managed forest land contract when we acquired it. And so we are still in the process of figuring out if we are withdrawing from that contract or like moving forward with it. And so I think once we figure that out, we'll be able to have we'll be in a better place to make a plan to decide how we want to steward the land and perhaps like improve the stands. But yeah, something that is on our radar is the farm itself has a small section of forest, and there's a lot of maples out there, but they're relatively small. And so we've been, just this past few months, we've been talking about, is this something that we want to put some energy into stewarding the land for a sugar bush like 15 years down the road. But yeah, thank you for that reminder. We'll definitely see.
You're welcome.
Work.
Yeah. Thanks, Jonathan. Other questions? I know as soon as I jump in, then someone will have a question. But the one unfortunate thing about Zoom, you can't see if anybody's typing. There should be like in Facebook where they have the bubbles, or in texting, but you can tell if anything's in progress or not.
Was there anything, Jeremy, that you want me to expand on more? Or?
Yeah, no, I think that was awesome. It's super exciting to hear about kind of all the different connections that are going on, the school connections and the community level connections, and the working with historic preservation, all those things, and just the kind of potential moving forward, I guess, is exciting for sure. So, and it, I think in connecting with some of the other tribes in the state too, like there's a lot of interest there, and kind of the interest in getting started again and supporting both individual producers, but also at the tribal level of production too. So it's awesome to have you all as an example of a program that's up and running, and for you to be able to share your experiences is really awesome. So yeah, it's great to just get to learn more about all that's going on there, and lots of amazing things. But
Mhm.
yeah, anything on your end you want to expand on or follow up?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah.
Sometimes I get into the weeds with details, so
Yeah, no,
if
that's
there's
awesome.
anything that was confusing, let me know.
Yeah, no, I think that's really good. So maybe we'll just wrap up with a couple of upcoming things, and one directly tied into this is that Extension is supporting tribal sugaring network in the state, and so that is just starting to get off the ground, and we'll be holding a meeting just virtually in December, so the announcement of that will be coming up pretty soon. But then we're actually looking at learning exchanges at several sites across the state, and Mino Bimad. This should be easier. Bimaadiziiwin
You just gotta like break it down.
Bimaadiziiwin, right? There we go.
Yeah.
Bimaadiziiwin. There we go. Now I got it for this moment. We'll hopefully be one of those sites. We're kind of working on details for that, but that sugaring network we're super excited about, and just excited to be able to support the exchange of information between tribes and tribal members, and kind of expand efforts there. So if anybody's interested in that, definitely get in touch with me. You should all have my email, but I'll share that in here as well. And I see that, Lori, thank you. I'll definitely keep you posted on that. And Lindsay is a student who's working with me, who's doing a lot of that coordination, so you'll be hearing from Lindsay. And then the other just kind of bigger event coming up for people to keep in mind if they're interested is the Wisconsin Maple Syrup Producers Association Winter Workshop or Winter Institute. That's coming up in January, so another opportunity to network with other producers from across the state and beyond, and equipment suppliers and all of that. So that'll be in the middle of January in Marshfield. So that's coming up. And then obviously future Maple Hours will continue to grow the topics in Maple Hour. January's, we'll skip December just because of the craziness of holidays and end of year and all of that. But in January, we'll be back talking about sugar bush management, and then there are some business related ones coming ahead, and a whole host of fun topics over the course of the next year. So keep an eye out for all of those as well. So with that, I'm going to do a couple of things. One, I'm going to launch a different poll, exit poll. So if you're, again, willing to share that or respond to that would be awesome. Make sure that popped up. All right, now it's there. And with that, I want to thank Allissa again. I appreciate you taking the time and sharing all the amazing work that's going on there, and for all the amazing work that you're doing and all the connections you're making. So appreciate the time.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you bet. All right.